Hello. Lissauer's tract, otherwise known as the fasciculus proprius, is a relatively important pathway which has certain bearings upon the localization of lesions within the spinal cord. And in a nutshell, what Lissauer's tract enables is the axons of first-order sensory neurons to ascend a couple of segments before synapsing on second-order sensory neurons within the spinal cord grey matter. So let's start off just by drawing a cross-section through the spinal cord and then extending that out into 3 dimensions. So here is our cross-section through the cord, and I hasten to add that dorsal is on this side. Here is our central canal with our dorsal horn and our ventral horn, like this. And if we extend this down into 3 dimensions, we'll see that I'm trying to show you a block of spinal cord which might contain 3 or 4 spinal cord segments. And let's try to just separate this out into segments. So I'll say that this is one segment, this is a second segment, and this is a third and a fourth segment. And of course, the grey matter there extends downwards through the cord. We know that the grey matter runs longitudinally throughout the spinal cord. So here's our grey matter running longitudinally throughout the spinal cord with our dorsal and ventral roots. Dorsal and ventral horns. We'll also add on a dorsal root plugging into one side of the spinal cord. So I'm going to make a little gap there, and we're going to just incorporate a dorsal root into this diagram. Okay, with the dorsal root ganglion just there. So what Lissauer's tract enables, as I said, is for the axons of our first order sensory neurons to ascend up through the cord for a short distance before synapsing. And specifically, Lissauer's tract has relevance to the spinothalamic system. It does not have relevance really to the dorsal column system. It is particularly relevant to the spinothalamic system. So let's select red and let's draw on a first order sensory neuron. Maybe this is a nociceptor, which is ultimately going to carry pain information to neurons of the spinothalamic tract. So this could be a nociceptor, it could be a crude touch receptor, it doesn't really matter. It sends its axon through this dorsal root. Remember, it has its cell body in the dorsal root ganglion, and then it proceeds through the dorsal root and into the spinal cord itself. Now, the classic description of the spinothalamic system, of course, is that this first order sensory neuron goes into the dorsal horn of its corresponding spinal cord segment, where it synapses on the second order sensory neuron, and it is then the second order sensory neuron that crosses the midline and then ascends up through the spinothalamic tract to the brain. So that's the classic depiction, okay? However, in reality, Lissauer's tract means that there is a population of first-order neurons which don't necessarily synapse at the level of their second-order neuron. There is, in fact, a population of first-order neurons that ascend a couple of segments. So let's draw those on using a green colour. So here is, once again, a first-order sensory neuron. It's part of the spinothalamic system. It might carry pain or temperature, for example. Like the one that we've just drawn, it has its cell body in the dorsal root ganglion, and it sends its axon through the dorsal root into the spinal cord. However, what it then does is it ascends up through this Lissauer's tract. Now, Lissauer's tract, if you want to know specifically where it is, all right, Lissauer's tract is actually sitting just at the tip of the dorsal horn. I know that doesn't come across really on my attempt at the 3-dimensional depiction, but the truth of the matter is that Lissauer's tract is found just in this region up here, so it's a relatively small bit of white matter. However, within this Lissauer's tract, the axons of these first order sensory neurons can ascend a couple of segments. Okay, so if we watch this green one, it's within Lissauer's tract and it ascends one segment and then two segments before entering the dorsal horn itself. And once it enters the dorsal horn, it then synapses upon its corresponding second order sensory neuron, which then goes on to join the spinothalamic tract. So what we can see here is that first order sensory neurons of the spinothalamic system have a number of options. Some of them synapse immediately at the level of their dorsal root. Some of them ascend in Lissauer's tract and synapse higher up. Now, this is all very well, this is all very interesting, but does it have any relevance to clinical practice? And the answer to this is yes, absolutely. Because what this Lissauer's tract enables us to do is bypass certain types of spinal cord lesion. Okay? So imagine, for example, that we have a lesion, and we'll depict that using this yellowy colour. Imagine that this spinal cord segment here, this half of the spinal cord segment here, and we'll call this, let's say that this is, I don't know, C5. Okay, so let's say that we've got a hemisection of the C5 spinal cord segment, and what that means is half of the C5 segment has been destroyed. And in destroying that half of the C5 cord segment, we have destroyed the spinothalamic tract on that side only. And you can see then that we have interrupted the pathway of these second order neurons as they attempt to ascend up towards the thalamus. However, thanks to Lissauer's tract, some of these were able to bypass the lesion. So this neuron here was able to bypass this lesion because it didn't synapse upon a second order neuron immediately. It ascended a bit before synapsing. And furthermore, we will have other neurons which have ascended from even lower levels. So we will have other neurons which may be ascended from down here, then ascended a couple of segments before synapsing in the dorsal horn above the lesion, and then going up through the spinothalamic tract to the thalamus. And the net result is that because we can ascend a couple of segments in Lissauer's tract, typically we see that the sensory level for spinothalamic modalities is a couple of segments lower down than we see the sensory level for dorsal column modalities. Okay, and we're going to talk about that more when I make the video on Brown-Séquard syndrome. But I just wanted to talk about the concept of Lissauer's tract here. So to recap once more, Lissauer's tract enables the axons of some of our first order sensory neurons to ascend 2 or 3 spinal cord segments before synapsing upon their corresponding second order neuron. The knock-on effect of that is that we may be able to bypass hemisections of the spinal cord, meaning that the sensory level for spinothalamic modalities is lower than the sensory level for dorsal column modalities in a spinal cord hemisection, aka Brown-Séquard syndrome. So thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful.